the series and we're talking about how to boldly face forward, how to boldly embrace and to go into the future as Christians, as citizens of this world, a future which is gonna be different probably for a good long while. Last week we said that in deciding to face forward, one of the main things is to try to not look back, try to not yearn for what normal looked like as we know it. And these are times when God can do, I believe, his greatest work through us. But I want to tell you, I think he can do his best work in us as well during times like this. So now I don't mean to sound like an apocalyptic dystopian prophet of doom and gloom, like the future is going to look like something out of the Hunger Games. But let's just face it, it's going to be different. But we can face forward into the future with faith and confidence because God's already there. God already knows it all. And I think one of the biggest obstacles to facing forward and embracing the future fearlessly is a little four-letter word, nostalgia. Nostalgia. Okay, it's not four letters. I just want to see if you're awake or not. But it can be, listen, it can be a curse word. When we get too absorbed to trying to hold on to the past or yearn for some distant past as we remember it, and we hear a lot about that these days. And I don't think that it's helpful about we got to restore America back to the golden age or whatever we might think. Now listen, I get it. I get it because I want to go back. I want college basketball just like it is. Sports is just weird cardboard cutouts at baseball games. Last Sunday I turned on ESPN. Maybe you caught it. It was the World Championship of Cornhole. Yeah, so it was the World Series of Cornhole. And I'm going to tell you, these announcers, they were getting into this game. Nothing against cornhole. It's a nice thing to play in the yard. But I was just like, what planet am I living on? I mean, I want football to be starting just like it used to. I want everything just like it used to be. Lori and I were driving through a subdivision last week, and it was about dusk time, and I couldn't believe it. Like all running all throughout the subdivision, there were kids. They were out running around playing with each other. They were riding on bikes. There were adults out in their driveways talking with each other and laughing with each other, and it was just like this hub of activity. And because you just don't see that much anymore. I said to Lori, I said, man, this reminds me of my neighborhood growing up. And I started to get a little misty. Oh, people, I'm going to tell you, I can get lost in a misty watercolor fog of nostalgia so easily. But nostalgia, whether it's based on reality or more than likely just based on our perception or combination of it, is deadly. It keeps us from facing forward. It keeps us from leaning into what God wants us to do in the world as it's going to be. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dweezil Zappa. Have you ever heard of this guy? Show the picture of him up there. Or Frank Zappa, rather. So that's Frank Zappa, weird guy, musician, named one of his children Dweezil. So, but he was a very, very smart guy. And in his autobiography, he says something that is so incisive. He says, it's not necessary to imagine the world ending in fire or ice. There are two other possibilities. One is paperwork. One is nostalgia. And when you compute the time between the event and the nostalgia for the event, the span seems to be about a year less in each cycle. Eventually, within the next quarter of a century, the nostalgia cycles will be so close together that people will not be able to take one step forward without being nostalgic for the one they just took. At that point, he says, everything stops. Death by nostalgia. And so we know this is true because this was true all throughout Scripture. And we see this time and time again. So God is doing new things, doing great things, and yet the people pine for the old times. They are released from slavery, from captivity, from bondage in Egypt, and God leads them and parts the sea for them, and they get out and they're heading toward the promised land. And then they start reminiscing about, well, didn't we have meat at least back then? And this is hard. And can't we go back? Yeah, you can go back to slavery if that's where you want to go back to. You go to the New Testament in the book of Hebrews. That's basically written because there were people, the early Christians. It was rough. They were not sure about this new Christianity thing. It was all brand new, and they were just yearning to go back, to revert back to Judaism with its very concrete way of worshiping God with the temple and rituals and sacrifices. And they just were wanting to go back to the life that they knew. I love what the great spiritual writer Oswald Chambers says. He says, it's not true to say that God wants to teach us something in our trials. He says, rather, through every cloud he brings our way, he wants us to unlearn something. He wants us to unlearn something. Now, he may teach us stuff, but I think in teaching us stuff, more often we've got to first unlearn some stuff. And so as we go in the next few weeks through this series, Facing Forward, we're gonna look at a few passages from John chapters 14 through 17. Now, these are the words to Jesus, to his very closest followers. Jesus knows that he's not going to have much time left on earth, and he knows the disciples are filled with uncertainty. He knows kind of what lies ahead for them. He knows that there's going to be a lot of uncertainty, that it all feels overwhelming for them. And he wants to prepare them for the struggle that they're going to have to move forward into the future. And he loves them. And he wants them to be ready for what they're going to have to deal with. And I really think that a lot of the same things that he says to his disciples on that time, he says to us as well. Now, before we jump into John 14:1, we've got to set the context. And so a few verses back in John 13. In John 13, Jesus, again, he's speaking with his disciples with this great affection. And he says to them in John chapter 13, he says, my children, the word there he actually uses is best translated, my little children, or dear ones. My children, I will be only with you a little longer. Well, the disciples, they don't like these words, and they want to go too. They're like, Jesus, we leave everything. We follow you. Where you go, we go. And Jesus says, you can't go where I'm going to go. Where I'm going, you can't come. But while I'm gone, he said, here are some things that you need to focus on. Here are some things that I don't want you to forget. And so that's what he does in verse 34 of John 13. He says, where I'm going, you can't come, but here's what you need to know. A new command I give you, to love one another. To love one another. A new command. They're like, well, Jesus, that's the greatest commandment. That's like all over the Old Testament. That's not a new command. But notice what Jesus doesn't say. He doesn't say, hey, I'm going to give you a new suggestion. I'm going to give you a new proposition, or I'm going to give you a new strategic plan. He says, no, the Lord, creator of the universe, who existed before existence was, he's given us a command. He says, love one another. He says, this is a new command. But it really wasn't a new command. The Bible teaches that we're to love our neighbor. It's one of the greatest commandments. So what makes this time new? He says, well, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. And that Jesus with his life gives us a whole new way of loving. And then he says this. He says, that's how people will know that you're my disciples. That if you love each other as I have loved you, and he's probably thinking in his mind, as you'll soon see the extent of that, then the world will know that you are my disciples. That's how people will know, that's how you will be identified as my followers. And so again, it's really important to see what does Jesus not say about this. He doesn't say, well, here's how people are going to know you're my followers. I got this little bag. I went to the store and I got this little bag full of stuff. I got these little fish stickers, little Jesus fish stickers, and you can put them on your car. I got some rubber bands. They say WWJD on it. If you wear those, that's primarily how people will know that you're my followers. It's a very clever way, I think, of doing that. And so, but he doesn't do that. He doesn't hand out Jesus trinkets and bracelets and all that kind of stuff. He says it's by the way that you love. In his final moments, Jesus doesn't say, hey, look here. Here's how everybody will know you're my followers. It's by your spot-on biblical interpretations. And so, guys, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that that you should all disagree about all kinds of unessential things, that you should make them matters of faith and fellowship, and that you will break with one another. And I'm picturing, guys, hold on, I'm picturing just a bunch of different denominations where we constantly argue with one another and fight, and that's how the world will know that you're my followers. That wasn't his plan. He didn't say that. Jesus, he didn't say, hey, here's how the world will know you're my followers. It'll be by your moral superiority and your self-righteous indignation. It'll be how you view this world as a battlefield to fight a culture war instead of seeing it for what it is, a mission field. Jesus doesn't say, hey, everybody will know you're my followers by your political perspective, by the candidate you back, by the vote you cast. That's how the world will know that you belong to me. He doesn't say, hey, everybody will know that you're my followers by your posts and your comments on social media. He definitely doesn't say that. He didn't say, here's what I want you to do, guys. I want you to spend hours scrolling through social media and criticizing as much as you can and being disagreeable as much as possible. That is how people will know that you're my followers. So I want you to be as judgmental and negative as possible, even when you have no idea what you're talking about. He said that's not the plan. Now, honestly, we might think that's the plan. Any number of those if we paid attention to the church these days. But that is not how the conversation went. Jesus said, the world you will know you are my followers by your love. It's by the way that we love each other. And so this is a continual theme through what's called, John 14 through 17 is called sometimes the final discourse of Jesus. But really, love is a theme all throughout John's writings. Revelation, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, the Gospel of John. John is all about love. He was called the disciple of love. And not only that, but we're not only to love those that we like, but we're to love those that we would consider enemies. And so we have this opportunity, says Jesus, that we stand out by the way that we love, not by the way we argue or the way we preach or the way we vote or the way we debate or demonstrate, but by the love that we show. And so going back to, for just a minute, John 13:36, Peter has a question. He says, well, Jesus, where are you going? And again, Jesus replied, where I'm going you cannot follow, but you will follow later. So you just kind of take in this scene. Jesus, they're in the upper room. He's broken the news to his disciples that he's going to be leaving. He looks around the room and he can just see that they're bewildered, they're confused, they don't know what to think. There's a lot they don't understand. They're disappointed and they're told now that they have to face forward into a future that they don't understand, they don't know. And listen, regardless of how it turns out, they know one thing right there. Like, the future is going to be a whole lot different than the past. My following Jesus forward is going to be a lot different than following Jesus looked in the past. And so they're scared, they're uncertain. They don't know what they're supposed to do. They don't know where they're supposed to go. And so Jesus looks around the room and he sees his guys feeling what I think a lot of us feel. And he looks and he sees people who are troubled. And so that's kind of the context as we move into John 14, his final words to his faithful followers as he helps them and prepares them for a different future. In 14:1, he says, so don't let your hearts be troubled. Don't let your hearts be troubled. So listen to that again. Jesus says, don't let your hearts be troubled. I don't know about you, but whenever I read something like that, immediately part of me just says, well, that's easier said than what? Easier said than done, right? Like it's not that I don't want to have a troubled heart. You know, you're talking about don't let yourself, like you can prevent it, but I don't want to have a troubled heart. Like I don't want to be missing sleep at night. I don't want to wake up every morning and have all this stuff coming back, everything that we're going through. I don't want to wake up every day and stumble through my day in a brain fog, feeling overwhelmed and confused and uncertain what to think about anything. Like I don't want to be troubled. And yet Jesus says with tenderness and compassion, listen, my little children, dear ones, beloved ones, I'm telling you, like, don't let your hearts be troubled. Okay, well, how do we do that? I'm guessing that's what the disciples were thinking. I don't want my heart to be troubled. So if you're telling me to not let my heart be troubled, then Jesus, that must mean that you're going to correct the situations which trouble my heart, right? Like you're gonna fix things that I'm nervous and worried about. Like you're gonna smooth out the road ahead. Well, that's not what Jesus did. But he says, you believe in God, believe also in me. The word believe is sometimes, I think it's better translated in versions that translate it as trust. It's this idea of you don't just believe something with cognitive assent, but you trust in it, you believe it. And it has this idea, the word of putting our full weight onto something. Like just putting all of our weight onto it, like trusting in it. Like maybe you've broken a leg or an ankle or whatever, and you have a crutch, and you know that you've got to put your full weight on that crutch for a period of time. It's putting your full weight on something. And so I kind of want to define it this way, that belief or trust is what you put your weight on so that you can move forward. It's what you lean on, what you step on, what you put your full weight on, who you put your full trust in that will help you face forward and keep moving forward. And so the question that I really want us to think about is what are we putting our weight on? What are we putting our weight on? Some of you might think, well, I knew 3 or 4 months ago what that might have been. Like I don't need a crutch. I don't need something to put my weight on because I can hold myself up. I can support my own weight. Well, and that worked pretty well until it didn't. Or maybe you put your weight on money or financial security. I like what one financial guy said shortly after the crash happened. He said, well, you know what they say, that the markets always recover until they don't. Like what are you putting your weight on that? So like don't let your hearts be troubled. Not because your income is high and your portfolio is diversified. Don't let your heart be troubled, not because I'm gonna fix everything. But you cannot let your heart be troubled, because even though I will not be here physically with you, I will still be present with you. And so the things that we lean on to keep moving forward, it's only a matter of time before all of those are going to disappoint you. Or maybe the pressure that we put on them to hold us up becomes too much and it begins to crack. And so maybe you put your weight on scientific advancement or political solutions, like it's going to happen. There's going to be the magic cure, or the list could be really long. Maybe the question is maybe I put my full weight on things other than Christ. So then the question is, then what do I really believe in? What am I really leaning on? Now listen, I'm not saying that if your heart is troubled, you don't believe in Jesus. I'm talking about if your heart is troubled, what are you most leaning on right now? And I think like that quote earlier from Oswald Chambers, I think that through this time, I think God would help us to unlearn some things. Unlearn some things. I was reading an article by a Harvard psychologist named Daniel Gilbert, and he wrote an article called What You Don't Know Makes You Nervous. And he did a bunch of research on this, and here was the conclusion in this article. He said, Americans are smiling less and worrying more than they were a year ago. Happiness is down, sadness is up, we're worrying more, we're actually smoking more cigarettes, which had been on the decline for a long time, but now it's up again. Depression is on the rise. And he explained that for most people. For most people, you ask them, well, what are you nervous about, or what are you anxious about, or why do you think that there's just this general mood that we live in our country? And by the way, this was all 2 years before COVID-19 took over. And he said, well, most people would say that the reason for their anxiety or whatever is the economy. Most people would attribute it to financial stress, to their personal financial situation. He says, but to be clear, it's not about finances. It's not about even relationships. It's about uncertainty. It's about uncertainty. And he talks about this experiment where I'm glad they did this at Harvard. Like I think this is probably good for those students who volunteered for this, but they separated volunteers into two groups, and in one group of volunteers, they knew that they were going to receive 20 intense electric shocks. Like, I don't know how desperate a college student has to be to sign up for these things. Like, we can't get people to volunteer in the nursery to hold babies, and they've got people volunteering to be shocked, right? So that's one group. They're going to get 20 electric shocks. The second group of volunteers, they're told that they're only going to get 3 of these intense shocks. But the difference between the two groups is that the one getting 20 shocks, they're going to know exactly when it's going to happen, whereas the group that's getting only 3 shocks, they're not going to know. And so they determined, I think you can probably guess where this goes, that the group that was only getting 3 shocks, because they didn't know when they were coming, they experienced more effects of suffering, rapid heartbeat, perspiration, and because they didn't know when it was coming. They didn't know when it was going to happen. Now listen, I get that. Uncertainty, whether or not you realize this, uncertainty is really the thing that causes us trouble, that causes our troubles to trouble us. And I don't like uncertainty. I don't know about you, but I do not like horror movies. I never have. I've seen a good number of them, but I don't like them. But, I kind of Lori and I got sucked into this thing. Everybody said how great this Netflix thing was, Stranger Things. And so we started watching that. And like at first it was okay. It was kind of creepy and weird or whatever, but it was set in the 80s, right? Like the golden age, like it was nostalgia just flooding over me. But if you've seen it, as you know, as the seasons progress, it gets more and more absolutely creepy. And I think we were in the next to last season. We're sitting there, and quite frankly, I was tired of the show. Like I'd had enough of it, but I was just sitting there watching it. But I knew that something was going to happen. You know, right? Because it's the music and the camera angles and the lighting, and it's a bunch of dumb people who don't get out of there, right? So like I knew that this thing was coming. So like I just closed my eyes. I just closed my eyes. I said, I'll know when it comes. I'm just going to wait here till it comes. Nothing will jump out. I won't get scared. Lori will not know that I have my eyes closed. And so I'm waiting. I'm thinking, well, surely it's going to happen pretty soon. It's going to happen pretty soon. And it never happened. And so I opened my eyes, and guess what happened? The second I opened my eyes, yeah. This thing jumps out and eats this dude. I mean, it was really, really disturbing. But I think that's kind of how we feel like can we just close our eyes and somebody wake me when it's over? We just kind of feel like that's the season we're in. We're all bracing, wondering if another shock is coming or what's going to happen. And yet we realize, don't we? We realize that throughout the entirety of human history, people have been through much, 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 much worse than what we're going through. We know that. So it's not necessarily the shocks. It's that we weren't ready for them. And we don't know what's coming next. And it just seems like it's one thing after another. And so in this final discourse of Jesus, he's preparing his followers for the shocks that are going to come. And he talks to them about the fact that they can expect this, that they can expect things are not going to be easy. And so he gives them, again, 2 things that seem contradictory. He says, in this world you'll have trouble, but then he says, don't let your hearts be troubled. Don't let trouble you. Don't let uncertainty make you uncertain. Well, that's cool, Jesus. Well, how do we do that? He says, believe in me. That's how. Believe in me. Hey, just believe in me. And for the disciples, like they had been following Jesus for 3 years. They had seen him do incredible stuff. They had seen him turn water into wine, walk on the water, have mastery over nature. They had seen him do all kinds of miracles. And so it probably was a little easier for them to believe in a sense than it might be for us. And so Jesus says to them, hey, you know me. You can count on me. In this world you'll have trouble, but don't let your heart be troubled. In this world there's a lot of uncertainty, but don't let that uncertainty make you uncertain. And look, I know there's a sense in which me saying to you, hey, believe in Jesus. You know, that's like the preacher equivalent of, take an aspirin and call me in the morning. I mean, it's such an easy thing to say, believe in Jesus. And I know that it can be a little patronizing, but I want us to think about this for a moment, because I want us to understand that we can put our full weight on our trust and our belief in Jesus. Now, if you're like me, you have a tendency to get a troubled heart pretty easily. You have a tendency to be troubled by trouble. And I would ask you not to throw away this line, but really what I would ask you to ask yourself is, okay, what do I really believe in? What do I really believe in? Now, last week we talked about how the biggest tragedy, and obviously the loss of life, but on a personal level, the biggest tragedy would be to go through a time like this and to not be changed, to not really think deeply and hard about our faith, about our lives. And this can be a time when we truly get really real about what we do believe. And here's the question: do those beliefs inform our life? Do they form our attitude? Do they form our priorities? What do we lean on when things get scary and unknown? Do we really believe what we believe? Now, I think a lot of us have a lot of beliefs that we feel very sincerely. Like if you were hooked up to a lie detector test and you were asked, well, do you really believe this? You'd have passed because, I really believe this. There are a lot of things. Like, I think most of us would, well, maybe not most of us, but a lot of us would say, hey, a healthy diet is really, really important. Like, you got to have a healthy diet, but then at some point you have to say to yourself, do I really believe that? Do I really believe that? Because that's not really reflective of my eating habits. And there's this term called incongruent values, where we say one thing, but those things we say don't align with our lives around what we believe. And when we do that, when we live that way, when we live constantly by incongruent beliefs, it really creates fear and anxiety in our lives. So I want to read to you something. This is from the American Heart Association, talking about how we have so much stress in our culture today. And here's the advice of the American Heart Association: to relieve stress, examine your values and live by them. Now, I'm sure, I didn't read the whole thing, but I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff in there about diet, about not smoking, about weight and blood pressure and all this stuff. But I thought it was interesting that one of their top things is examine your values and live by them. In other words, hey, the more your actions really reflect your beliefs, the better you'll feel. And if we really believe in Jesus, and then we need to live like it's true. If we really believe in Jesus, then when we feel overwhelmed, when we're anxious and we don't know what to do, we need to remember that we believe in Jesus. When our financial situations are insecure and we feel vulnerable and the economy is volatile and we don't know what's going on around us, we believe in Jesus. We are dependent upon Him. And so we just ask ourselves, do I really believe what I believe? And I'm not trying to make us feel bad about this, but I do think that maybe we need to really reflect on, I say that I believe this, and I really do. So how does that affect my reaction? How does that reflect my response to all of this? Because I'm telling you, the disciples believed in Jesus. And I believe in Jesus. I believe that Jesus and the gospel is the only hope for the world. It's the only thing that really, truly matters. I believe that God will one day rain down mercy upon the lonely and the brokenhearted people, and they will experience comfort and peace. I believe that there will be one day no more sorrow, no more suffering, and no more pain. I believe in Jesus. I believe that God is the God who goes before us and that there's nothing that surprises Him. And this is so true that we're trying to face this unknown future, but God is already there. He's already been there. He has already gone there. And He is not caught off guard by any of this. And everything is unfolding according to His plan. I believe that He will heal, that one day the crippled will walk, the blind will see, because we believe in Jesus, don't we? We believe that grace is sufficient and that it's always enough. It's always enough that we believe in Jesus, that He forgives the guilty, that He sets free the addicted. I believe that His love can soften any hardened heart. I believe that Jesus can redeem anything. I don't think there's anything so broken that Jesus can't redeem it, because we believe. I know that there's trouble. I know that there's uncertainty, but I'm not going to be troubled by the troubled because I believe in Jesus. And I'm going to put as best I can my full weight on Him. And when I don't, which too often happens, I will pray, God, forgive me for not trusting in You. So to help the disciples not have their hearts troubled, Jesus tells them, believe in me And then in verse 2, before we kind of wrap this up, he says, in my Father's house there are many rooms. And if it weren't so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? And I love how he phrases this, because basically he was saying, like, dude, I don't lie. Like, what have I ever told you that didn't happen? I don't lie. I wouldn't have told you something if it wasn't going to be true. And so as we kind of begin this final discourse, Jesus says there are two things that you need to believe to find peace when you're troubled. You need to believe in and put your full weight on who you know, but you also ultimately need to believe where you'll go. We need to believe in Jesus, and we need to believe and have confidence that he's gone to prepare a place for us. Now, next week, we're going to spend some time, as we continue walking through this, we're going to spend some time looking at heaven and this place that God has created for us. And what do we know about it? What does the Bible tell us about it? I got an email several weeks ago from a dear member of our congregation who has been through some horrible pain the last few years. And it's a very nice email, but at the end she said, hey, Chris, it would be kind of nice. Could you talk about heaven? And so I thought, yeah, it's probably a good thing to talk about. So next week we're going to take a look at heaven, as Jesus says, in my Father's house are many rooms. But now listen, 2 weeks ago, we talked about Luke, some of the most astonishing words in Scripture, Luke 9:51. And it says, as the time approached for Jesus to be taken up to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. He set his face toward Jerusalem. He steadily moved onward toward Jerusalem with an iron will. What did he do? He faced the future. Like we trust in Jesus. We don't know everything that the future holds, right? But as God's people, we've got to put our weight on Jesus, even though we don't know fully what's going to happen or how it's going to be. But we need to face into the future. The amazing thing to me is that Jesus knew. He knew exactly what his future held. And it says that he set his face toward Jerusalem, and he went forward toward that future. He went forward to the cross. He went forward to the humiliation. He went forward to the pain. And eventually he went forward to the tomb. But then eventually he went forward to heaven. And so before we wrap up, I just want to challenge you to take these first words of Jesus in John 14:1. Let these words sort of try to set the course forward for you, the path forward. When Jesus said, hey, dear ones, my little children, like I get it. I get it. But listen, don't let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. I think he says the same thing to us, that we can face an unknown future because he already faced a known future. He faced the cross so that we can lean on him, we can trust on him. Listen, he wouldn't have told us this if it weren't true. That's what he said to the disciples, and that's what he says to us as well.